right, guys. So it seems that, at least in this whole deal, this story, Richard Dawkins decided to double down instead of, well, yeah, he got pushed back and he decided to double down. It's a pretty common deal, sort of like J.K. Rowling's. Um, yeah, let's just go ahead and get this started, and then I'll chime in whenever I think it's appropriate.
Anyway, so Richard Dawkins is being cancelled again because he decided to say something sensible, and he actually hit a really raw nerve in progressive circles here. And this is probably the Achilles heel of intersectionality, and will bring the whole thing down. So he tweeted out this in 20, and I don't know why, by the way. I have no idea why Richard Dawkins in the current year was just sat there with his cup of tea and was like, you know what I'm going to tweet about transgenderism. How could this go wrong? Things I'd say. I liked Richard Dawkins. I'm a fan of Richard Dawkins. I was a fan of the New Atheists back in the day. And so I have absolutely no ill will. And he has, in ways, stood up to the progressives. So I do respect the man. So I find this a bizarre thing for him to just randomly tweet out one morning. He says, in 2015, Rachel Dolezal, a white chapter president of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was vilified for identifying as black. I like the way he used the capital B black there. That's proper. That's correct from progressive viewpoints. Political black. Some men choose to identify as women, and some women choose to identify as men. You will be vilified if you deny that they literally are what they identify as. Discuss. And this went about as well as you might have expected. And so he had to follow this up with a reply tweet saying, I did not intend to disparage trans people. I see that my academic discuss question has been much misconstrued as such, and I deplore this. It was also not my intent to ally in any way with Republican bigots in the US, now exploiting the issue. Yeah. Oh, yes. Virtue signaling against Republican bigots will definitely get you uncancelled, Doctor.
This guy's a right winger. He got offended by that comment because apparently he identifies as being right wing. And he was offended because Republicans are bigots. And Dawkins points this out. And this guy's like, oh, you're virtue signaling. So he's a moron. But so the question itself, and the way that Dawkins laid this out, so it has been shown that he is a bigot when it comes to trans people. He's emotional about it. It's not all logic, and I proved that in the last one. So it's not necessarily a stretch to think that he's trying to disparage trans people, because that's what he's doing. That's his entire point. That's why he's fucking getting into this in the first place, obviously. However, the way that he laid this out initially is, I don't know, I don't find it problematic, and this is why I go back to, I'm a free speech advocate. So if you disagree with someone, use your fucking words. Don't try to shut them down. Jesus Christ. Woke up a little early. All right. So I don't agree with this automatic, like, fucking just call someone a bigot and just shut them down immediately, because that's what's happening here, at least in this particular case. Now, don't get me wrong, because I call people bigots when I provide evidence to show why they're a bigot. There's a difference between those two things. So I also don't try to make it to where they cannot defend themselves, because that's just wrong. And it also makes it look like you have no argument. So the key to dealing with this situation is to actually explain to Dawkins where he's wrong. And that's what I will do. But let's continue this for now.
But what Dawkins has hit upon here is something called the Hypatia controversy. Now, Hypatia is an academic feminist journal, and this was an article that was published by Rebecca Tuvel, who wrote an article called "In Defense of Transracialism." Now, you can imagine how this is all going, because the thrust of it is to make the argument that, hang on, if we're saying that someone can take an immutable biological category like sex and decide through force of will to say, actually, I'm going to adopt the gender expression of the opposite biological.
This is where they're making the biggest mistake, and I think all of them do this, and that's what makes them retarded, because it's so obviously not the case. They're stuck in this. I think they do it because they don't want to feel like they're bad people, so they have to lie to themselves in order to like retain that sense of decency, I guess. So they tell themselves that this is entirely nurture, that this is entirely like social contagion and stuff, like that it's this cool new trend, and then it like through social contagion people start thinking that, hey, if this is the cool thing, I want to do it too, which is absolutely not the case. You're vilified more so than anything being transgender. No one would just choose it, and that's not true. It's not a choice. It's fucking biological in nature. Essentially, you're born this way. We've proven it. And when I say we, I'm talking about humans. I'm talking about like scientists have proven that there's a fucking biological link to it. And by the way, it's not new. That's another thing they do. They act like, how come all of a sudden? There is no all of a sudden. This has happened since fucking way back in ancient times. It's not new. Anyway, let's continue.
Category, then what exactly prevents someone from doing this with race? And the answer is nothing. The answer is this is exactly correct. You are using precisely the same logic with precisely the same premises, and there's no particular.
Incorrect. You are straw manning the entire opposition. And you probably know it. And you're a fucking retard. What a fucking joke. Alright. I'll continue for now. I'm about to fucking load up the pipe.
Reason that a white person therefore cannot identify as a black person. If a woman can identify as a man, if a man can identify as a woman, and if various other forms of identity can exist. And so the main thing here is, she says, since we should accept transgender individuals to change sexes, decisions to change sexes, we should also accept transracial individuals' decisions to change races. If you agree with progressive logic, then the should there, I suppose, is correct. And therefore, the answer is, yeah, you kind of have to, which really undermines a lot about progressiveness. And it caused an absolute meltdown at the time, because no, I don't think they were really expecting anyone to make this logical connection, which is weird. But the thing is, the argument against it.
Well, no one really made that connection because there is no connection, because it's built on a straw man argument. Which one I just already covered, that you believe that it's a choice. It's not a choice. And that actually kind of destroys your entire narrative once you realize that. Like entirely. Like everything's gone. Like your entire argument here is built upon a lie.
From the left, from the intersectionals who are trying to prevent this from being an accepted argument is, well, if you didn't grow up with black people's lives and experiences and you can just return to being white, you're not black and I don't like it, right?
Not true. You're straw manning again, but I'll continue in a moment.
And that is identical to the TERF argument about men transitioning to become women. And of course, as anyone who follows any of this will know, the TERFs, the trans exclusionary radical feminists, or just feminists, traditional gender critical feminists, as we would call them, have been totally anathematized by the intersectional left. These are bigots on par with Hitler and must be treated as such, and have been deplatformed in many ways from many different.
I don't know about the fucking TERF specifically. Maybe they do make that claim, but that's not the claim I'm making, and I'm just focusing on my own deal here, which is supported by science. So he may be correct about that specific one there, but he's also trying to like generalize this. It's like this is the entire left view, which is not true at all. In fact, I can absolutely annihilate him, and I will in a moment. And it will simultaneously annihilate Richard Dawkins, because he's essentially espousing the exact same view. Well, not exactly the same, but it's based on the same mistake anyway. So this guy's a fucking moron.
Places and are just treated like absolute dirt, even though, I mean, are they wrong?
I mean, they're class traitors for siding with biology.
Yeah. And biology is counter-revolutionary.
Nah, actually, if you side with biology, then you will take my side, which is will understand that this whole argument of it being like this arbitrary choice is incorrect because biology says otherwise, which means you are the moron. Next.
And so this is the Achilles heel of intersectionality. So the solution that the intersectionalists have is just not talk about it. You deny the argument can even be raised. And this is why the humanists have reacted as they did, because Richard Dawkins is saying, well, what's stopping it? And they're like, oh, that's it, cancelled. From the Wikipedia.
And this does happen, and I agree with them on this. That's not how you handle things like this. If you can't use your words to explain why someone's incorrect, no matter how hateful they are, if you can't explain why they're incorrect, then don't fucking get involved at all. You don't have a right to shut someone down. And I don't agree with that at all. You're never going to change anyone's mind. In fact, it makes them double down. It makes them think you got angry and shut them down because you can't defend your view, which means you're wrong. That's what they get out of it. It's stupid. You should never do that.
Right, article about this controversy. Tuvel and the article came under attack on Facebook and Twitter, and she was called a transphobic, racist, crazy, stupid, and she was accused of having engaged in, quote, epistemic violence. That's an amazing term. Epistemology is how we know things, so it's how we gain our knowledge. How could that possibly be considered to be a form of violence?
Because it's heresy.
Exactly, that's it. That's the only way. You gained knowledge in a violent way. By what? Following a pattern of logic we already use. So that pattern of logic must already then be violent. So transgenderism is violence against the TERFs, or the TERFs are violence against like the trans people. I mean,
this is why speech is violence.
This is why speech is violence. Several feminists refer to her as a Becky, which is a slur for white women. So racist. And the article was called Violent Crap and Whack S. Basically, there was a massive meltdown. They absolutely lost it. And so Richard Dawkins, blundering into this, has found himself on the negative side of the American Humanist Association. And their board has decided to retract the Humanist Award he was given in 1996. So 25 years ago, Richard Dawkins was awarded Humanist of the Year for promoting scientific discourse and humanist values. And they turn around 25 years later and like, what? You don't think, you think that white women can become black women? You're out. Okay, lunatics.
Straw man. They explain in fucking vast detail why they decided to retract it because he went against their values, which he'll cover in a moment. But notice how this guy isn't honest about what happened. He's trying to frame it all in this retarded fucking dribble that he's fucking spouting out now.
Like, what happens to all your board members or anyone who was a humanist before then as well? Because they've all believed the same thing.
Yeah, they gave Richard Dawkins the award.
It's not about the fucking belief. It's that Richard Dawkins is not. Richard Dawkins understands, at least I believe, the mistake that he's making. He's a fucking biologist. He knows what he's doing. It's not about like, oh, you believe this and that almost everyone else before that believed, like you're framing it incorrectly. Richard Dawkins is being a douchebag for the sake of being a douchebag, and I'll explain. Well, I already sort of explained why in the previous video, but I'll go even further in a moment.
They must all be bad people too. Weird, it only stops there. But anyway, they say, regrettably, Dawkins has over the past several years accumulated a history of making statements that use the guise of scientific discourse to demean marginalized groups and approach an approach antithetical to humanist values, with a link, and we'll go into that in a second. His latest statement also implies that the identities of transgender individuals are fraudulent, while also simultaneously attacking black identity as one that can be assumed when convenient.
So this guy's he's like, oh my God, it blows my mind because he's such a moron. He's like, he's infected by the fucking Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, like he's trying to be like all snarky and shit. Like, I can't believe they said that, because he doesn't fucking understand what they're saying because he's a goddamn moron. Anyhow, let's let him continue.
What are you saying there, right? Okay, so if Richard Dawkins is saying, well, hang on, if we can apply transgender ideology for men to women to men or men to women, then that logic can be applied to black to white and white to black, and that is an attack on transgenderism and the black identity. So, okay, but don't you see that you are the ones who have completely set the ground to destroy both of these things? But Dawkins is the bad guy because he dare mention it. You're not allowed to talk about this. His subsequent attempts to clarification are inadequate and convey neither sensitivity nor sincerity. Apparently, Dawkins was right. You will be vilified. That's exactly. He was like, "Oh, you'll be vilified for this." Yes, you will. And the funny thing about this is when they tweeted this out, all the replies were, "You're engaging in a moral panic." Yes, they are. They're engaging in a moral panic because there is no logical resolution to this that doesn't also destroy black activism in the same way that like women's rights.
Yes, there is, and I will give you that logical fucking reasoning in a moment. Although this guy might be a complete fucking moron and not understand anything. He's just stuck in this confirmation bias bubble. But many people are at least capable of grasping the point that I'm about to make. But anyway, I'm actually not even going to continue with this dude because he's like a fucking absolute fucking douchebag and a fucking moron. So I'm not even going to continue. He's not making any valid points anyway. He's just straw manning the opposing argument. So let me go ahead and fucking correct this. So the reason why, and by the way, I don't agree with them automatically shutting people down. I'll just come out and say it. That's stupid. You're only fucking making them more powerful because of what I already said. It basically makes it seems like you're running away because you don't have an argument. You don't ever do this, ever. Use your fucking words. So the difference, the reason why this is a false analogy that Richard Dawkins makes in this post is because transracial is not legitimized because there isn't a large enough body of evidence linking a biological brain difference that leads to it. So we know for a fact that being transgender is a thing that occurs naturally, biologically. It's not a choice. It happens at birth or very close to it, based on the massive fucking body of evidence that we have. You can tell by brain structure differences and that their brainwave patterns and the actual structure of their brain is more similar to their chosen gender than it is to their biological sex that they were born as. Like this is that's it. That done. Like you're all defeated right there. Over. Fucking idiots. So yeah, that's why. Because there is no large body of evidence that shows that people there's some very extremely rare examples of people that have, I can't remember what it's called, but where you think that you're a different race. Yeah, can't remember what it's called. But there isn't enough, and for it there's no evidence that I've seen anyway that shows that it's like something that happens at birth, because I don't think it exists. There's your difference. It's not an arbitrary choice. So secondly, the concept would be far more exploited by racist people who would use it to get away with terrible shit. So, to my knowledge, this doesn't happen with transgenders. Like, there's a whole lot of right-wing lies that get made up, like fucking, like all this shit about fucking transgender people in a woman's bathroom fucking being used to like fucking target women and violence, rape, all that shit. It's all fake. It's fake news. It doesn't happen. There's not one example that they can point to. And by the way, even if they had one, it still wouldn't make their case because it's a fucking anecdote. Right? So there you go. It's not complicated. You're fucking wrong. And I think for the most part, yes, they're stupid people. Like, I think this guy's just an idiot. But like Richard Dawkins and people like that, they know what I'm talking about already. Richard Dawkins has proven that he understands that it's biological in nature and not just a random arbitrary choice, which means he's purposefully misconstruing this because of his feelings, which is not very scientific at all, by the way. You're letting your personal feelings get in the way of fucking science here. And you're being an asshole because of it. That's it. So you're all wrong. Like, it's very simple. All you have to do is point out to the fact that there's a fucking biological element, at least it's nature, not nurture, that people are transgender in the first place, and that's it. Their entire thing falls apart. By the way, they did the exact same thing. This is like their tried and true tactic. They did the same thing with homosexuality. They tried to make it like, oh, homosexuality is a choice, and therefore we can attack it without being pieces of shit. And in the exact same way, and they're not as hardcore on the homosexual front lately. They seem to be focusing on trans shit, but it's still the same deal. Like, homosexual people, by and large, the vast majority anyway, are born homosexual, meaning you're trying to attack people for something that they have absolutely no control over. It's no different than you, like if it's a guy anyway. If you're a heterosexual male, you have no choice. As long if you're not asexual, you're attracted to females, right? It's no different for homosexual people. They're born that way, which means you're just a piece of shit if you have a problem with it. That's it. Or you use religion as like you cherry pick religious shit in order to try to get some sort of an excuse to attack people on it when it's a non-issue. Just like transgender, it's a non-issue. It harms no one. You just want an excuse to be a piece of shit. That's it. So, yeah, I'm not even going to continue this, and that wasn't very difficult. So your entire fucking argument annihilated with little to no effort. Thank you for your time.